Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're digging into a really fascinating corner of the wine world, straight from the sources you've shared with us.
Yeah.
The BRS Carmem grape.
And what a collection of sources. We've got everything from the real nitty-gritty technical research notes out of Embrapa Uva e Vinho, that's Brazil's powerhouse agricultural research arm for grapes and wine,
Right.
all the way through to a sommelier's sensory breakdown of what these wines are actually like in the glass.
So our mission today, it's pretty clear. We want to unpack the BRS Carmem. This isn't just, well, any grape. It's a product of deliberate innovation. We're going to uncover its unique story, what makes the vine itself special, how growers are actually working with it, and crucially, the kind of exciting potential it holds for wine, especially in those tricky climates.
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
So let's get into what your sources reveal about this intriguing Brazilian breakthrough.
Yeah, and right away the sources tell you why this grape is even, well, necessary.
Necessary. Okay, that sounds like there's a story there. What's the core problem BRS Carmem is designed to solve?
Well, it gets right to the heart of Brazil's big viticulture challenge. You see, traditional Vitis vinifera grapes, your Cabernets, Merlots, Pinot Noirs, they really struggle, often mightily, in Brazil's tropical and subtropical, very humid conditions.
And that struggle comes down to, is it the heat or...
It's mostly the humidity and disease, yeah. Those humid climates are just perfect breeding grounds for fungal diseases. Things like mildew, powdery mildew, rot.
Ugh, sounds like a nightmare for growers.
It can be. Growing vinifera there means constant vigilance and often, a heavy reliance on chemical treatments.
Yeah.
BRS Carmem was developed by Embrapa precisely to offer a robust, disease-resistant alternative.
Built specifically for those conditions.
Exactly, while still being capable of producing quality red wine. That was the goal.
So this isn't just some happy accident grape variety. It's a targeted solution really born from research, designed to allow fine wine production where it was previously, well, incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible.
That's the why, in a nutshell.
Okay, that's the why. Now let's look at the what. What is this vine? Where does it actually come
Right,
from?
its story goes way back. It's part of Embrapa's long-running genetic improvement program, stretching all the way back to the 1980s.
Wow, the 80s. So we're talking decades of dedicated breeding work.
Decades, yeah. It takes time.
And it's described in the sources as an interspecific hybrid. Can you break that down? What does that actually mean in plain English?
Sure. Think of it this way. Most classic wine grapes, like Cabernet Sauvignon or Chardonnay, they're different varieties, but they all belong to the same species, Vitis vinifera.
Right.
An interspecific hybrid, though, is a cross between different Vitis species entirely. So you're borrowing traits, maybe resilience traits, from wilder vines that are adapted to tougher conditions.
Okay.
And combining them with the wine quality potential you might find in other crosses, or maybe even some vinifera relatives.
So it's like engineering a family tree for both toughness and taste.
Kind of, yeah. Very careful, long process.
Who are the parents in this particular case for BRS Carmem?
According to the sources, it's a cross between BRS Lorena, that's another hybrid known for its toughness, also developed by Embrapa, so they're building on their work.
Ah, okay. Makes sense.
And a specific piece of research material, this code CNPUV 149456. That second parent is credited with bringing in some key traits, like disease resistance and characteristics really suitable for making red wine.
Interesting. The sources also give us a little peek at what the vine physically looked like, the amplographic details.
Right, the visual ID. It's generally described as having medium to high vigor.
Meaning it grows pretty strongly.
Yeah, it's a reasonably strong grower. The leaves are fairly typical grape leaves, medium to large, pentagonal, with those distinct lobes, pretty standard looking.
And the actual fruit, the grapes themselves.
The clusters are medium to large, kind of conical shaped, and they tend to be medium to high in compactness. So the berries are fairly close together.
Okay.
And the berries themselves are medium-sized, round, with this really distinctive dark blue to black skin.
And that skin thickness is mentioned as medium and also important. Why call that out? What's the significance?
Ah, yeah. That medium thickness is actually crucial because the skin is where all the color compounds and the tannins are stored.
Right, for red winemaking.
Exactly. When you make red wine, you leave the juice in contact with those skins, that's maceration, to extract color and structure. The right thickness, like this medium thickness, means you can get good color intensity and structure for a red wine, but without necessarily pulling out really harsh or aggressive tannins. It's a balance.
Got it. And its growth cycle, the phenology, is described as Early to medium. That sounds potentially useful.
Oh, it can be a major advantage, especially in many Brazilian climates. Some areas have quite unpredictable late-season rains.
Which can ruin a harvest.
Totally. So an earlier cycle means the grapes can reach ripeness and be picked before those potentially damaging rains arrive. It helps preserve the quality of the fruit.
So, summing up its characteristics, its core superpower really seems to be this incredible adaptability to diverse Brazilian climates, heat, humidity. But the sources pinpoint one specific trait as its absolute biggest asset. What is that?
Yeah, without a doubt, it's that intrinsic resistance to the major fungal diseases we talked about earlier: mildew, powdery mildew, gray rot, sour rot, the big ones.
And this isn't just like slightly better resistance.
No, the sources really highlight this as a significant natural resistance. It's inherent in the grape's genetics.
Okay, and the real-world impact of that resistance for a grower.
It's huge. It means growers need far, far fewer treatments with fungicides, maybe none in some cases, or very targeted.
Wow.
That's massive for sustainability, obviously. It cuts down on costs, reduces the environmental footprint. It's a genuine game changer for growing grapes in humid zones.
Connecting that back to you, the listener, that natural resistance is really the core insight here. It shows why this grape matters, not just in Brazil, but potentially for the future of wine in challenging climates everywhere. It's about sustainability. It's about expanding where quality wine can actually be made.
Well said.
So, okay, we know it's resilient. How do you actually grow this vine? Let's move into the cultivation practices the sources discuss. Where is the ideal place to plant BRS Carmem?
Well, like most grapes, ideally it prefers good sun exposure and well-drained soil. That's pretty standard.
That's adaptable, right?
Exactly. The sources really emphasize its adaptability. While those conditions are ideal, it's proven quite tolerant of various situations. Of course, good site preparation helps maybe improving drainage or adjusting soil pH and nutrients based on analysis, the usual vineyard prep.
And how do you train the vine? What kind of trellis systems work well?
It seems pretty versatile there, too. It does well on espalier systems that's training the vine along wires.
Like you see in many vineyards.
Right. That setup is great for getting good sun exposure onto the leaves and airflow through the clusters, which naturally helps prevent disease. Even more effective with a resistant grape like this.
And what about the overhead system, the pergola?
The pearl, yeah. That system can be really useful in hotter regions. It provides a bit of shade for the grapes from the most intense sun while still allowing for good ventilation underneath. The choice really depends on the specific site, the local climate, and what style of wine the producer is aiming for.
Okay. Beyond the basic structure, what about the day-to-day management in the vineyard? Things like pruning, canopy work?
Yeah, crucial stuff. Pruning is essential to manage its vigor. Remember, it's medium to high vigor and to control the amount of fruit it sets. The sources mention it responds well to common systems like gueux, which is mixed cane and spur, or just spur pruning with short canes.
And the goal there is?
To balance the vine, you want enough leaves to ripen the grapes properly, but not so much fruit that the quality suffers. It's about finding that sweet spot for maturation.
And canopy management, like pulling leaves. I imagine that's important in humid Brazil.
Oh, absolutely critical. Removing some leaves around the grape clusters, they call it desfola, does two key things. It improves sun exposure on the grapes for better color and flavor development, and maybe more importantly, it dramatically increases air circulation.
Which helps dry things out, reduce fungal risk.
Exactly. Less moisture lingering means less chance for disease, even with a resistant variety. They also mention desponta, which is topping the growing shoots to control the vine's vegetative growth.
Makes sense. What about water and nutrient needs? Is it thirsty?
Irrigation needs obviously vary depending on the location, the soil type, the rainfall. But yeah, it's usually necessary during dry spells to keep the vine happy and the berries developing.
And feeding it.
Fertigation is mentioned. That's delivering dissolved fertilizers through the irrigation system. It's an efficient way to provide balanced nutrients, but this is always guided by soil tests and leaf analysis to see what the vine actually needs.
Okay, so even with this fantastic natural resistance, do growers still have to worry about pests and diseases at all? Or is it completely hands-off?
Well, you always have to be vigilant in farming, right? Viticulture is no exception. But the key insight here from the sources is that its natural resistance drastically reduces the intensity and frequency of interventions needed.
So less spraying.
Much less, typically. The sources advocate for integrated pest management, or IPM. That means prioritizing prevention, first good canopy management, site selection, and using biological or cultural controls whenever possible. Chemical sprays are really a last resort, used only when absolutely necessary and very targeted. It's a completely different level of management compared to struggling with a highly susceptible vinifera variety in the same climate.
And for you listening, why does all this vineyard talk matter?
Because this adaptability and this disease resistance, they unlock genuinely new possibilities. It means high-quality wine grapes can potentially be grown successfully in regions previously considered just too challenging or too risky. It's literally expanding Brazil's wine map.
And the environmental angle.
That reduced need for sprays is a tangible benefit. It's better for the environment, potentially safer for the vineyard workers, and could even improve the grower's bottom line. It's about growing quality grapes more sustainably.
That connection to sustainability feels really significant, especially now. All right, let's shift gears. We've grown the grape. Now let's take it from the vineyard to the glass. What kind of wine can BRS Carmem actually make? What's its enological potential?
The sources sound quite enthusiastic about this. They describe its potential to produce really singular, unique red wines. Wines with a distinctive sensory profile that seems particularly well-suited, maybe, to the Brazilian palate and the local market.
Okay, paint a picture for us. What does that profile look like? What are the signature aromas you'd expect?
Generally, it's described as very aromatic and inviting right off the bat. You should expect notes of fresh red fruits, think cherry, raspberry, maybe strawberry, often mingling with some darker fruits too, like blackberry or blueberry. A nice mix.
And you mentioned a spicy element earlier. Is that typical?
Yes, that seems to be a key identifier in the descriptions. Black pepper is a very common descriptor. Sometimes you might find notes alongside it, like licorice or maybe clove.
Interesting complexity. Anything else? Floral? Herbal?
Depending on the specific wine and how it was made, yeah, you might also catch delicate floral hints like violet or perhaps a subtle herbaceous character. It's not just simple fruit.
Sounds quite intriguing. Can it make different styles of wine, or is it mostly one thing?
No, absolutely. That's a part of its appeal and versatility. The sources detail a few main styles. You'll definitely find young and fruity reds.
What are those like?
These are really designed to be fresh, vibrant, all about the primary fruit. They typically see only short skin contact during fermentation and usually no oak aging. The goal is to capture those intense fruit aromas, keep the tannins soft, and maintain a bright acidity.
How should you drink those?
They're meant to be enjoyed young, within a year or three of the vintage, and they can often benefit from being served with a slight chill, especially in warmer weather.
Okay, and at the other end of the spectrum, can it make more serious wines?
Yes, the sources also detail its capacity for more structured or even age-worthy reds. These wines aim for more body, more structure, more complexity.
How do they achieve that?
Typically through longer maceration, more skin contact time to extract more tannins and color, and often they'll see some time aging in oak barrels.
Does the type of oak matter?
Oh, definitely. The choice between French or American oak, whether the barrels are new or used, the toast level inside the barrel, all these decisions significantly impact the final wine's structure, its tannins, and the aromatic profile, adding those spicy vanilla or toasty notes.
And what kind of flavors develop in those aged wines?
With time, especially with oak influence, they can develop those more complex, savory tertiary notes, things like sweet spices, maybe tobacco, leather, sometimes even earthy undertones, complementing the fruit. These wines have the potential to age gracefully for several years, maybe 3 to 7 years or more in some cases.
Wow, quite a range. What about rosés? Does it work for that?
It apparently makes charming rosés. Very light, very refreshing. These require just a very brief period of skin contact, maybe just a few hours, to get that lovely, delicate color, ranging from an intense pink to a paler salmon.
In the profile.
They really retain those fresh red fruit aromas, strawberry, cherry again, and the floral notes. And crucially, they have this vibrant, thirst-quenching acidity that makes them super easy drinking.
You highlighted soft tannins and balanced acidity earlier. Are those the key sensory takeaways across the styles?
Yes, that seems to be the recurring theme in the source descriptions. The tannins, especially in the red wines, are noted as being remarkably soft and velvety, even when the wines are young. This makes them very approachable, not harsh or astringent.
And the acidity?
That balanced acidity is mentioned frequently, providing freshness and liveliness. That's especially valued in a warm climate like Brazil's. It keeps the wines from feeling heavy or flabby. And that combination soft tannins, good acidity, makes it incredibly versatile with food.
Does it play well with others? What about blending potential?
Definitely seems to. The sources mention it works nicely in blends with other common red varieties like Syrah, Cabernet Sauvignon, or Merlot. It can add color, boost the fruit intensity, contribute acidity, and bring in that signature spicy note.
So it can add a unique Brazilian touch to a blend.
Potentially, yes. And it can also be blended, perhaps with white grapes even, to make rosés.
And how much does where it's grown, the terroir, influence the final wine? Does it show its place?
Like any sensitive grape variety, yes, it reflects its environment. The sources suggest that specific conditions, things like cooler nighttime temperatures during ripening or growing in particularly well-drained soils, can enhance its freshness and lead to greater aromatic complexity.
So even though it's adaptable, it still expresses nuances.
Exactly. Its resilience means it can grow in many places, but it will still express the subtle differences of those locations, which is exciting.
Let's briefly trace the grape's journey through the winery. Once it's picked, what are the key steps in transforming BRS Carmem grapes into these different wine styles?
Well, it all starts back in the vineyard, actually, with the winemaker deciding the perfect moment to harvest. That means getting the balance just right between sugar levels, acidity, and crucially, phenolic ripeness, the ripeness of the skins and seeds.
Okay, grapes arrive at the winery. Then what?
Then, typically, the grapes are destemmed, removing the berries from the stalks and gently crushed to break the skins and release some juice. Standard practice.
And then the maceration you mentioned.
Yes, and the maceration or skin contact. This is where the juice stays in contact with the skins, and this is a critical decision point for the winemaker, based on the style they want.
How so?
For a light, fruity red, or especially for a rosé, you'll have very short maceration, maybe just hours for rosé, maybe a few days for a light red. For those more structured, age-worthy reds, you'll want much longer maceration, perhaps weeks, to extract more color, flavor, and tannins from the skins.
And how do they manage that extraction during fermentation?
They use standard techniques like remontage, which is pumping the fermenting juice from the bottom of the tank over the cap of skins floating on top, or pidgeage, which is physically punching down that cap of skins. Both methods ensure good contact and gentle extraction.
What about the fermentation itself, the yeast part?
Right. The yeasts are what convert the grape sugars into alcohol. Winemakers might use carefully selected commercial yeast strains known for specific characteristics, or sometimes they might rely on the native yeasts naturally present on the grapes and in the winery for more complexity, perhaps.
And temperature control.
Crucial, especially for preserving those delicate fruit aromas we talked about. For red wines, fermentation temperatures are often controlled, maybe kept in the range of 22-28 degrees Celsius, about 72-82 Fahrenheit. Too hot, and you can boil off the nice smells.
Makes sense. What about malolactic fermentation? Is that common?
Often, yes, especially for the structured red wines. This isn't done by yeast, but by bacteria. It converts the sharper malic acid, like in green apples, into softer, creamier lactic acid, like in milk.
So it smooths the wine out.
Exactly. It softens the perception of acidity and can enhance the wine's texture and complexity. Less common, usually avoided for the fresh rosés where you want that bright acidity.
And after fermentation, aging options.
Again, depends on the style. Wines destined to be fresh and fruity might stay in inert containers like stainless steel tanks to preserve that primary fruit character.
And then the others.
The more structured reds often move into oak barrels or sometimes other vessels like larger casks or even concrete eggs these days. Oak aging adds complexity, helps integrate the tannins, stabilizes color, and gives the wine structure for longer aging.
And we talked about oak choices.
Right, the type of oak, the toast level, the age of the barrel, and how long the wine spends there. These are all key winemaking decisions that shape the final wine significantly.
Are there any other essential techniques mentioned in the sources for handling BRS Carmem?
Well, the careful use of sulfites, sulfur dioxide, or SO2 is mentioned. That's standard practice to protect the wine from oxidation and spoilage microbes. Also, maintaining strict temperature control throughout the entire winemaking process, from receiving grapes to bottling, is highlighted as vital for maintaining quality and stability. The overall focus seems to be on preserving the purity of the fruit expression.
It's clear the grape offers a lot of flexibility in the cellar to craft different styles. Now, you mentioned earlier its adaptability opens up new regions. Where is BRS Carmem actually putting down roots? and finding success across Brazil's diverse landscape.
Yeah, this is one of the really exciting parts of the story. Because it's so resilient, it's thriving in areas well beyond the traditional established wine regions in the south.
Can you give us an example of somewhere perhaps unexpected where it's doing well?
Absolutely. The Vale of San Francisco in the northeast of Brazil is a prime example. This is a semi-arid region, incredibly hot and sunny.
Doesn't sound like typical wine country.
Not at all. But they have controlled irrigation thanks to the San Francisco River. And get this, the conditions allow growers there to actually manage 2 harvests per year sometimes.
2 harvests, wow.
Yeah. And BRS Carmem is performing remarkably well there. That intense sun and warmth help it produce deeply colored, intensely fruity wines. It really handles the heat.
So it handles intense heat and the humidity we talked about earlier. That's quite a combination.
Precisely. And even back in the traditional subtropical humid heartland of Brazilian wine, the Serra Gaúcha and Rio Grande do Sul, even there, BRS Carmem is gaining ground.
Why there? If they can grow other things?
Because its disease resistance offers such a significant advantage over the fungal issues that are so prevalent in that humid climate. It gives producers a reliable, quality option that requires less intervention. It adds diversity.
Okay. What about other areas of the Southeast Highlands?
Yes, regions in states like Minas Gerais, São Paulo, Espírito Santo. These highland areas are also seeing success with BRS Carmem. Producers there are often using clever viticultural techniques like double pruning or winter harvest to shift the ripening period into the drier winter months.
Avoiding the summer rain.
Exactly. And this allows them to produce really lively, distinctive wines that express the unique conditions of those specific microclimates.
It really sounds like its spread across Brazil is just beginning. Is that the sense you get?
Definitely. Embrapa is actively testing it in even more potentially promising regions. So yeah, its potential geographic reach within Brazil seems to be still expanding. It could genuinely open up entirely new winemaking frontiers within the country.
And are we just talking about experimental plots, or are producers actually bottling successful wines from these diverse regions?
Oh no, the sources highlight concrete cases of commercial producers already making and selling quality wines with BRS Carmem in these different areas. Often, they're working in close collaboration with Embrapa researchers to really optimize the viticulture and winemaking techniques for their specific location. The research is translating into real bottles on shelves.
That's the real proof, isn't it? The true test.
Okay.
Okay, let's get down to the ultimate experience then. Tasting BRS Carmem wines. If we were sitting down with a glass, how would a sommelier, based on your sources, describe the overall impression?
Well, the sommelier's notes you provided describe the wines as having a kind of graceful lightness, which is interesting, a generally pleasant profile, easy to enjoy, and they also use the term exotic, suggesting it has a unique quality, something that stands out from more familiar international grapes.
Intriguing. Let's revisit those different styles now, but maybe add some more specific sensory details from the tasting notes, starting with those young, fruity reds.
Okay. Visually, expect an intense ruby color, quite vibrant. On the nose, it's dominated by those fresh red fruits we mentioned. Cherry, raspberry, strawberry are common descriptors. Maybe some black fruits, too, like blackberry and blueberry. And definitely look for that signature black pepper spouse. Sometimes a hint of violet or a subtle herbaceous note might peek through.
And on the palate, how does it feel?
It should taste dry, with a really refreshing, noticeable acidity, those lovely, soft, velvety tannins we talked about, generally medium-bodied, not too heavy. And the finish should be fruity and persistent, leaving you with that feeling of freshness.
What's the ideal serving situation for those?
Best served maybe between 16 to 18 degrees Celsius, that's about 61, 64 Fahrenheit, possibly even slightly cooler if it's a warm day, and definitely enjoy them while they're young, within 1 to 3 years of the vintage, to really catch that vibrant primary fruit character.
Okay. Now, the more structured or age-worthy reds, how do they differ in the glass?
Visually, these will likely be deeper in color, a more concentrated ruby, maybe showing some garnet hints if they have a bit of age. The aromas will evolve beyond just fresh fruit. You'll start to find more complexity, potentially from the oak aging notes of sweet spices like clove or cinnamon, maybe hints of vanilla or toast.
And what about age?
With time in the bottle, those tertiary aromas can develop things like tobacco, leather, perhaps some subtle earthy or forest floor notes, alongside more integrated, maybe stewed or dried fruit characters.
And the taste and texture.
On the palate, the tannins will likely feel firmer than in the young reds, but they should still be well integrated integrated and refined, not aggressive. Expect medium to potentially full body, still with that important balanced acidity, keeping it lively, and a longer, more complex finish.
How should we approach tasting and serving those more serious versions?
Give them a bit more warmth than the young reds, maybe closer to 18-20 degrees Celsius, 64-68 F. Using a larger bold glass, like a Bordeaux or Burgundy-style glass, will help the aromas open up, swirl it, let it breathe a bit. And these wines have the potential to age beautifully, as we said, potentially 3-7 years, maybe even longer, for the best examples from good vintages.
Great. And finally, the rosés. What's the sensory experience there?
Visually, they sound striking, an intense, attractive pink to salmon color. Really pretty in the glass. The aromas are all about bright, fresh, red fruits. Strawberry, raspberry, cherry tend to dominate. Maybe some floral notes, too.
Into taste?
Tasting it, you should get that vibrant, zesty, pleasant acidity right away. That's what makes them so incredibly refreshing. They're typically light-bodied, very easy to drink, with a clean, fruity finish, just pure refreshment.
Chilled, I assume, like most rosés.
Oh, absolutely. Enjoy these well-chilled, maybe down around 8-10 degrees Celsius, 46-50 F. Perfect for a warm afternoon or as an aperitif.
Okay. Are there any general tasting tips the sources offer specifically for appreciating BRS Carmem wines across the styles?
Yeah, a couple of things stand out. Pay close attention to serving temperature. It seems particularly important for highlighting that freshness and the aromatic profile. Don't serve the reds too warm or the roses too cold.
Good tip. Glassware.
Use a decent quality, medium-sized glass. A standard Bordeaux or even a Pinot Noir style glass should work well for the reds, allowing you to swirl and capture the aromas. A medium white wine glass is fine for the rosé.
And when tasting?
Just go through the usual steps. Look at the color, intensity, and hue. Swirl the glass gently to release the aromas. Look for those fruit notes, the spice, any floral or other complexities. Then taste it. Pay attention to the acidity level, the feel of the tannins in the reds, the weight or body of the wine, the overall balance, and how long the flavors linger on the finish. The key, really, is to appreciate its inherent freshness and its versatility.
That freshness and balanced acidity you keep mentioning sounds like it would be a dream for pairing with food, especially maybe in a warmer climate like Brazil's. Any specific food pairing suggestions from the sources?
Yes, its versatility with food is highlighted as a major plus. It seems to pair particularly beautifully with lighter or medium-bodied dishes where it won't be overwhelmed.
Okay, so for the red wines, what kind of food works?
The structured reds are suggested as a great match for grilled or roasted red meats, especially thinking about typical Brazilian churrasco cuts like picanha or maminha or maybe flank steak. The wine's acidity and those soft tannins can cut through the richness of the meat nicely. They also mention it works well with roasted chicken or turkey.
What about pasta dishes?
Excellent with lighter sauce pastas. Think fresh tomato and basil, simple olive oil and garlic with herbs, or pasta primavera with lots of fresh vegetables, nothing too heavy or creamy.
And vegetable dishes, sometimes tricky for reds.
BRS Carmem seems surprisingly adaptable here. Grilled, roasted, or sautéed vegetables could work well. Even salads, maybe those with some lighter proteins like grilled halloumi, fresh cheese, or legumes.
Jesus.
The young reds are suggested as lovely with medium-intensity cheeses that are common in Brazil, like Minas Padrão or Meia Cura, or even grilled queijo coalho. Again, the wine's acidity and soft tannins provide a nice contrast to the richness of the cheese.
Any other specific ideas that caught your eye in the sources?
Let's see, roasted chicken comes up again. Lighter versions of moqueca, the Brazilian fish stew, especially pairing the rosés with that. Light pizzas, maybe margarita or vegetable topped. And softer charcuterie boards could also work well.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah.
Are there any types of dishes that might not be a good match? Anything that might overpower the wine?
Generally, yeah, the sources suggest that very heavy, very rich, or intensely flavored dishes, think maybe a super heavy stew or something with very dominant spices, might overwhelm the more delicate nuances of BRS Carmem. It seems its strength lies in pairing with vibrant, fresh, moderately intense foods.
So perfect for Brazil's climate and cuisine, really.
Exactly. It's highlighted as being ideal for the tropical climate, for summer days, casual meals, outdoor gatherings, celebrations. Very fitting.
Okay, this has been fascinating. So what's next for this really promising grape? Let's look towards the future and Embrapa's ongoing research efforts. Are they still working on it?
Oh, absolutely. The research effort is definitely continuing. They're building on the success they've already achieved with BRS Carmem. It's not a finished project.
What are the key areas they're focusing on now, according to the sources?
One really big one is elite clone selection. Now that the variety exists, they're hunting within the BRS Carmem population for individual vines clones that are just exceptionally good.
What makes a clone elite?
Maybe it shows consistently enhanced aromatics or even more refined acidity, perhaps superior resistance to a specific local disease pressure, or just proves perfectly adapted to thrive in a very specific microclimate. They're looking for the best of the best to propagate.
And continuing to understand how it behaves in different places.
Exactly. Terroir adaptation studies are crucial. They want to get an even deeper understanding of how BRS Carmem performs across Brazil's incredible range of climates, soil types, altitudes, and latitudes.
Why is that important?
It helps identify the absolute optimal spots for growing it, and also helps winemakers understand how BRS Carmem can express the unique identity, the terroir, of different regions across the country.
What about fine-tuning the winemaking itself?
Yes, that's another focus, vinification optimization. They're working on developing even more refined, specific protocols for producing all those different styles we talked about, from the fresh young reds to the complex age-worthy ones, and those lovely rosés. The goal is to fully capture and enhance the grape's inherent qualities in each style.
And linking back to that sustainability promise we discussed earlier.
Right. Ongoing research into resilience and sustainability is key. This includes looking at how a grape might adapt to predicted future climate change scenarios and developing vineyard practices that are even more sustainable things, like further reducing inputs, using water and other resources more efficiently, and promoting biodiversity in the vineyard.
That's really forward-thinking. And presumably, all this valuable research needs to get into the hands of the people actually growing the grapes and making the wine.
Exactly. Knowledge transfer is noted as a vital part of Embrapa's mission. They provide essential technical support, run workshops, publish guides, and work hard to get these research findings directly to the producers. The idea is to help them implement best practices and really maximize the quality potential of both the BRS Carmem grape and the resulting wines.
So pulling this all together then, our deep dive today has really taken us on a journey. We started with BRS Carmem's origins, basically as a research project born out of necessity, designed specifically to tackle Brazil's unique and often challenging climate conditions.
And we followed it to the point where it's now being successfully cultivated across incredibly diverse regions of the country. And it's producing distinctive, high-quality wines that seem perfectly adapted to those local conditions.
It feels like it's more than just another grape variety, doesn't it? It really comes across as a symbol of Brazilian innovation in viticulture, of adaptation, and maybe a determination to forge a unique national wine identity separate from just mimicking international styles.
I think that's fair. It's undeniably diversifying Brazilian viticulture. And as we saw, it's opening up entirely new areas for fine wine production that might not have been viable before.
The potential seems clear for producing these high-quality red and rosé wines, typically characterized by that vibrant fruit, the refreshing acidity, and those approachable soft tannins. Wines that can truly speak of the Brazilian terroir in its many forms.
Yeah, and looking ahead, fueled by all that ongoing research at Embrapa and the grape's own inherent toughness and resilience, the future certainly looks bright for BRS Carmem in Brazil.
Which leaves us, and you, with this final thought to maybe ponder. As we see climate change continue to impact traditional wine regions all over the globe, causing many familiar grape varieties to face really new and significant challenges. Does the success story of grapes like BRS Carmem grapes, specifically bred for resilience and adaptability to challenging conditions, does that offer a potential roadmap, maybe a blueprint, for the future of viticulture worldwide?
It's a really interesting question. Does it underscore the vital role that hybrid varieties developed through dedicated local research might play in finding sustainable solutions for growing wine grapes in a rapidly changing world?
And beyond BRS Carmem, what other unique, perhaps currently overlooked regional grape varieties out there might hold similar keys? Keys for adapting our vineyards and our wines to our evolving global climate. Something to think about.